Hey guys, so wrong book to start off with, but today, last time anyways, we were talking about how magic works in Anima Beyond Fantasy. And today, we're going to be talking about the Dominion of Ki. And just like last time, we're going to start off by taking a look at the two classes in this game that heavily utilize using Ki. This is the Technician and the Tau. Now, Ki is a very complicated subject, and I'm going to try and go at it at the best way possible. In fact, I'm probably going to put this video into multiple parts because there's a lot of stuff you can do with Ki. But the first part is going to cover everything in the core rulebook. Part 2 will cover everything in the optional book that is included with Anima Beyond Fantasy called Dominus Exit, the Dominion of Ki. We're not touching this book in this video, but we are going to be touching the core rulebook in this video. And everything in the core rulebook. So first things first, let's look at the actual stats and numbers that matter for our technician. Now, when it comes to actual stats, like your attributes, every attribute, save for intelligence and perception, I believe, are not really included when it comes to Ki. But everything else is valid for Ki techniques that you make. Now, there are three things that are important on the class sheet that matter for your Ki techniques: your martial knowledge, your Ki, these are your key points I'll describe later, and your accumulation multiples. Martial knowledge is the resource you use for buying and creating new Dominion techniques and building and buying passive/active Ki abilities. You also gain martial knowledge per level, as you can see up here. A technician gets 50 and the Tau gets 30. And you can get more by buying them per level in the optional book, but I'm not talking about that. But you can also get more by buying martial arts, which is where the Tau comes in. So let's start with the Tau actually when it comes to what they do and how they differ from the technician. So as you can tell by looking at it, these numbers for buying Ki stuff are bigger. It costs 2 development points to buy 1 Ki point, 15 to buy an accumulation multiple, whereas it's 1 for 1 for Ki and 10 for 1 for the technician. The upside of the Tau though is that martial arts have reduced DP costs for the Tau. Most of them only cost 20, but the first one only costs you 10 development points. What's a martial art, though? We briefly covered what a combat module was and stuff like that, and martial arts in the core rulebook are also in combat modules. Martial arts are ways to basically augment your unarmed fighting to make it useful, because without them, your unarmed punching ability is literally garbage. There are a lot of martial arts, and to learn them, all you need to do is spend your development points to buy them. The other book, honestly, has martial arts a lot better when it comes to how you buy them. But in this book, every martial art costs you 50 development points, unless you're a Tau. Then the first one costs you 10, and the rest costs you 20. I believe there is a... Oh, no, okay, that's in the other book. In the other book, there's a limit to how many martial arts you can buy based on your attack and block skill. But the core book there isn't one. One note to keep in mind is these martial arts, some of them give you bonuses to your block and attack and stuff, like Sambo, for example, plus 10 to block. It also gives you 10 more martial knowledge. That's awesome! And it also, in its advantages, tells you what the martial art actually does. This tells you the base damage is 20, but it's plus character strength bonus, it uses blunt damage. That's not that great, but the point of getting this is to cut your penalty for trapping, area attacks, takedowns, and disarm in half. That's really good. Now, this one doesn't require any secondary abilities, but stuff like the more advanced and powerful ones do. Kung Fu requires acrobatics out of hand and style. You need these at the base level to buy them. So, you need 40 acrobatics, 40 sleight of hand, and 20 style to buy Kung Fu. Taekwondo requires nothing, and you can buy as many of these as you want. Advanced martial arts are a little bit different. They require you to master previous martial arts to get them, first off. Like this one, Malakaya, however you say it, requires grappling or Sambo. It also requires inhumanity and a fairly high attack and defense if armed. Now, you can combine these martial arts. Yeah. You can combine you can get all the... So, For every martial art you get this bonus at the bottom, no matter what, to everything you do. So, if you have Capoeira and Kung Fu, you can get a plus 20 to dodge from that, and it all stacks up to plus 50. You can also add on all the advantages of martial arts. The only difference, though, is you can only accept one damage of martial arts. So, let's say you want to deal, you're a user of Tai Chi, Capoeira, and Sambo. So, with Capoeira, you can hit up to 5 opponents with an area attack, and with Sambo, you can cut the area attack penalty in half. You can stack those together, and all three augment your damage, though not by a whole lot, but Tai Chi is better for damage. It allows you to add double your power bonus to your damage, so you would use that for your damage. Does that make sense? So the way it would work, if you were fighting with Tai Chi, Capoeira, and Sambo all in combination, I'm just gonna double check this before I Oh, they do have the limit. Whoops. The limit is different for martial arts. I made a mistake. Every 40 points you attack and 12 attack on events, you can get a martial art. I'm just double checking the combining. Yeah, okay. I'm just making sure I'm not misinforming you in that one. So yeah, basically, if you have, like I said, Sambo, Capoeira, and Tai Chi, you can use the damage of Tai Chi and the special abilities of Capoeira and Sambo all in conjunction to basically be a crazy super area attack, flurry of kick person and have a good time and do a lot of damage. Very simple. This is great if you don't want to use a weapon. Martial arts are very powerful. There are martial arts that are on that allow you to attack on the energy damage table and stuff and allow you to basically become a very potent fighter. The only downside to martial arts is you can't get plus quality fists, but the martial arts more than make up for that. Very simple. Now let's get on to the actual key stuff that I want to actually talk about. Martial arts is more of a side tangent, and something I honestly, as a DM, don't use very often. So as you can tell, I don't use it very much, but I do use ki quite a bit. There are lots of monsters with ki, and you're gonna want to probably even make monsters yourself that utilize ki techniques and most certainly ki abilities. First things first, though. I'm going to skip this key accumulation chart for now. I'm going to talk about key abilities first. These are the fundamental building blocks to making key techniques, more or less. Because you need to invest in some of these key abilities to even make key techniques. A key ability, though, is basically a ability or passive effect that you could purchase along the way to give yourself the typical Kung Fu anime powers. The two most important for someone who wants to make Dominion techniques are use of ki and ki control. Ki control allows you to basically be full aware of your supernatural power and allow you to accumulate ki. It also allows you to learn Dominion techniques. Use of ki is the foundational ability that you need to basically buy almost all of these other ki abilities. You don't need ki control to get a lot of these, but you do need use of ki for basically all of them. So every character will probably, no matter who they are, will definitely get use of ki, because use of ki is required for two other abilities that are basically whoever you are required for later in the game, and that is Inhumanity and Zen. Inhumanity only requires use of ki, and it basically just allows you to roll above 280 on your dice. That's all Inhumanity does. Zen allows you to remove all limits to your rolls, so you can roll as high as you want and be able to reach, obviously, Zen difficulty in their checks and abilities. Every character will eventually want to get these one way or another. This is the easiest non-magical item way to get it. The rest of these abilities, I don't want to go through all of them. There's a whole lot of really good ones. They're all very useful and can be used to accomplish a lot of tasks. I'm going to go through, though, the ones that a lot of characters are going to get. Firstly, I'm going to talk about Presence Extrusion and Aura Extension. These two abilities are similar to Inhumanity and Zen, being very important for most characters. Aura Extension is only useful, though. Keep in mind if you use a weapon and shield, though. If you are a martial artist, you only need Presence Extrusion. And what it does is it allows you to basically block and interact with energy attacks with your bare hands by creating an invisible aura of ki around them. It allows you to cut fireballs in half with your bare hands, touch fire and move it, and do stuff like that. This is If you are a unarmed character or you want to get aura extension, this is what you need to block fireballs and to block laser beams. If you don't have this, you can't block them. So if you're a block-based character, you're going to die. Just straight up. If you have dodge, if you use dodge to defend yourself, these abilities aren't as important. Save for when you want to attack elementals and creatures who are immune to physical damage. Just keep that in mind. Aura Extension does around about the same thing as present Extrusion, however, it increases the damage of your weapon by 10, its Fortitude by 10, and it gives it 5 more breakage when you put your aura over your weapon. And it also allows you to, kill and fight creatures that can only be hurt by energy, and also block energy-based attacks. This is a fundamental ability. Every character should consider getting one of these two abilities, just so that they can fight everything and not get fucked over. There are other really good abilities, but those 4 that I mentioned are by far the most important, and almost are mandatory. Now, let's talk about Dominion techniques themselves. Dominion techniques are very complicated, but I'm going to go through them, not by going through all these fucking charts, because you can do that your fucking self. We're going to the sample techniques to explain how they work. These sample techniques are a great way to basically dissect what is in a key technique and to explain how they're made the best. So we're going to look at the example tree known as Celeritas to describe how key works in the best way possible. So to learn this technique, you require 25 martial knowledge. Where does this number come from, you might ask? I'm going to go back to those charts now to explain where that number comes from. This is how we're going to do this, by the way. So I'm going to go to, let's look at this attack ability effects table. And I'm going to explain this one table, and me explaining this one table should basically get the idea of how key works in buying anything from a table. So there is the benefit you get, how much the primary and secondary costs, the martial knowledge costs, the maintenance, and the level. In the Dominus Exit book, you have to buy the ability to maintain an ability with a separate facet, I'm going to call it. But in this, you don't. So we're not going to worry about that. So what's primary and secondary? I mentioned key points before, and key points are based off your stats. There are many stats that use key. The only stats that don't are your intelligence and your perception. Every other stat that your character has influences your base key points. Your base key points is equal to your final score in that stat. So if you have 10 dexterity, you have 10 dexterity base key points. Now, the attack ability key facet, to get plus 10 to your attack when using this technique, would cost you 2 primary characteristic dexterity key points. Now, let's draw an example where you're a weird character and you only have 5 dexterity, but you still want to use this ability. There are these optional characteristics you can use instead, but they will make it cost more key points. You might want to do this if you have, for example, let's say you have 14 strength and only 5 dexterity. You're definitely going to want to slot in that strength over that dexterity to make it cheaper for you overall, so you can unleash the technique multiple times or maintain it for longer. There's also a secondary cost. Key techniques can have as many facets as you want, but the first facet you buy is the primary facet, and it follows this primary table of how many key points it costs for the initial execution of the ability. The secondary one means how many key points every other facet will cost for you to unleash that key technique. Make sense? And depending on the level of that facet, so let's say you want that plus 75, it'll cost you more key points and more martial knowledge to include that ability to your technique. This will also influence the maintenance. The maintenance cost is always in key points equivalent to the type of key points used in your technique. Also keep in mind these plus 2s and 3s, if you use an optional characteristic, will increase the maintenance cost as well. Just as for your information. You can buy more key points. Let's go back to the the technician. You can buy more key points, as you can see, in the combat section. This does come out of your combat pool limit of 60%. So keep that in mind that when you're buying key techniques, you're probably going to have lower attack and dodge than usual. but your Dominion techniques will generally way more than make up for your lack of base attack and dodge, or base attack and block. You can buy key points. When you buy key points, you buy them for the stat. So you can buy strength key points and dexterity key points separately, and that's how you have to buy them. Now, let's go back to the technique creation section, and let's talk about, how do you unleash these techniques? Let's go to Solaris. I told you now how you buy stuff off these charts, and how techniques are made. I want to go to another chart real quick, actually, before we go into the next part. And that is this very useful step-by-step table. So this one is important. It tells you there are 3 levels of techniques. Level 1, 2, and 3. Simple. Level 1 techniques must at a minimum cost 20 martial knowledge. And at a maximum cost 50. And it can only have one disadvantage. Disadvantages are in these following pages, and they give you downsides to your techniques to reduce the martial knowledge cost. Now, when you make a level 1 technique, for example, you can only buy level 1 facets for that technique. So for your attack ability example, you can only get up to plus 100 attack in a level 1 technique. You can't get to 125 yet. Okay? Clear. When it comes to making techniques, this step-by-step table here is very useful to make sure that you can go through all the steps of making your main and secondary effects of your key technique. I like using this chart to make sure I'm not accidentally cheating as a DM when I'm making my own custom techniques for monsters or for otherwise. Very useful to make sure you're following any of those rules. Now, let's go back to the sample techniques, and I'm going to go through the next important thing about key. So, let's use the Extrusion Eris technique. It's a level 1 key technique. It costs you 25 martial knowledge to learn. It's a long distance attack of 50 meters that gives you a plus 50 to initiative. Now let's talk about this technique. This technique, as I explained in this top blurb, uses the base damage of your weapon for its damage. So that means that if you have a great sword, it'll do more damage than if you had a dagger. Simple enough. Now, it will cost you 4 agility key, 4 dexterity key, and 2 power key to unleash this technique. What does that mean? How do you get these key points? So we talked about magic last time and charging up Xeon. It's very much the same way. You have what are called key accumulation multiples. Your base accumulation multiple is based on the stat that key point derives from. If your stat falls between 1 and 9, your base accumulation is 1. 10 to 12 is 2. 13 to 15 is 3, and 16 and higher is 4. This is how much key you charge up in one full turn of charging. When you're charging, the best example I can give to what charging is think about Dragon Ball Z when they're charging up for their big key attacks, for their Kamehameha waves, Big Bang attack. That is you charging key very similarly. You are taking time and effort to generate energy. Now, unlike in Dragon Ball Z, it isn't necessarily obvious when you're charging ki, especially with these low power techniques. Simple? I think it's simple. I hope it's simple. It's complicated probably when I tell it to you like that. Now, you can buy accumulation multiples right here. They cost you 10 development points for 1. Now, like with buying key points, when you buy multiples, it gives you that multiple for that stat. One multiple can increase your strength accumulation from 1 to 2, but it won't increase the rest by just buying 1. You buy accumulation multiples on a stat-by-stat basis, on a key pool-by-key pool basis. So your stats give you your base key pool, and you buy multiples and key points for those pools on a pool-by-pool basis. And then you charge up using key from those pools to unleash your technique. When you are ready to charge up that technique, you fire it. If you can charge up that technique in one turn, so let's say you have enough accumulation to charge 4 dex, 4 agility, and 2 power key in one turn, like a wizard, you can immediately fire off that technique right away. If it's something like this Extrusion Eris technique, it gives you a bonus to initiative, then you add that initiative to your initiative roll for that round. If you know, that's what you're doing. And that's the basics of what a Dominion technique is. And then the last thing I want to talk about is one particular key disadvantage that you can take to make your technique cheaper. And it's right here on this page, elemental binding. So what you can do is you can basically make techniques cheaper by requiring you to only use one or two key elements to unleash that technique. These will reduce the martial knowledge cost. What's a key element? Luckily for you, they tell you all the elements in these little charts. So damage resistance is earth element, and mirage is water and darkness. That means if you pick your element to be fire and only fire, you can't pick damage resistance, you can't pick mirage, and you can't pick like physical key weapon, light and water, but you can pick projection because that's fire and earth. And you could pick critical enhancement because that's also fire and earth. And that's how the elements work. All the other disadvantages are very self-explanatory. There are also additional advantages that make it cost more martial knowledge and more key. The cost is up to the key point that you're using, the key type. MK is MK, level is level. That is the core rulebook of how key works. There are a lot of example techniques you can use to help familiarize yourself and to keep things simple. There's even more in the other book. The next video will be part 2 of how key works, and I'll explain to you everything about key in its particular Dominus Exit the Dominion of Key book. It's going to be a doozy of a topic, because we're basically going to be going through this whole fucking book, and going through literally everything. Literally. It's going to be a blast. So I'm going to see you guys later. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, it'd help if you gave me a like or a comment or subscribe or whatever. See you around.